In today's video, we're going to be breaking down DJ Giddens of Kansas State. What are strengths and weaknesses? How is he best utilized? Where do we think he's taken in the NFL draft? And finally, what do we think we can expect from him in fantasy? Watch to the end of this video and you'll have a good idea. Taking a look at his height and weight, per PFF, he's 6'1", 212 pounds. I think the height and weight are reasonably accurate, and unfortunately, that would give him a BMI of 28.0, which is definitely less than ideal. We typically prefer our backs to have a 30.0 or higher BMI to be workhorses at the NFL level. He's 21 years and 4 months old right now, and so he's going to be 21 for the majority of the NFL season, and he is an early declare, which, as I said many times, doesn't per se matter quite as much with running backs, but, obviously we want our guys to be young, right? Taking a look at his production, it's pretty good. So as a true freshman, on 89 attempts, he had 519 rushing yards, 5.8 per pop, 6 touchdowns, and only 1 fumble. And then through the air on 11 targets, had 8 receptions, 98 receiving yards, and 0 receiving touchdowns on 12.3 yards per reception. And so overall, that's a decent season for a true freshman, but he stepped it up in a big way as a sophomore. And so he had 223 attempts on the ground, 1,226 rushing yards. Did see his yards per attempt decrease from 5.8 to 5.5, but that's generally expected with more volume, typically at least. Still had 10 touchdowns, though, and 0 collegiate fumbles in his sophomore season. And so through 2 seasons, to only have 1 fumble is quite good. Then through the air, he definitely stepped it up. And so on 40 targets, he had 30 receptions, 326 receiving yards, 10.9 yards per reception, and 3 receiving touchdowns. Then we take a look at his true junior season. There's some better and some worse things about it for sure. On 206 attempts, which is less than this previous season, he did have more rushing yards, being 1,343. Did increase his yards per attempt, which we like, from 5.5 up to 6.5. Did see his rushing touchdowns decrease from 10 to 7, though. And then he also had 2 more fumbles, but overall, only having 3 total collegiate fumbles on over 500 rushing yards, or attempts rather, is really good. Then we take a look at his passing game utilization. He wasn't quite as involved. He had 32 targets this time, 20 receptions, 258 receiving yards, and 1 receiving touchdown, but he did see his yards per reception go up to 12.9. Taking a look at some advanced stats here, among draft-eligible FBS running backs with 100-plus rush attempts, that's a sample size of 76 here, Giddens received 206 attempts on the ground. Now, his yards per attempt of 6.5 was tied for 5th in the sample size. We love that. His yak per attempt of 4.16 was 7th in this sample size, which is quite interesting because he really isn't the bruising back that you might expect, seeing as his yak per attempt is relatively high. But he's a very talented back, and I'll kind of explain that in a little bit. Taking a look at his breakaway run percentage, his 54.9% was 3rd in the sample size, and so those are 3 elite metrics. Taking a look at his PFF rushing grade, his 85.0 grade was 25th. I definitely think he's better than the 25th best rusher of the football. He has incredible agility, change of direction, very good vision for cutback lanes, maximizes yardage constantly, and that is a trait I really like out of the running back position. Now, taking a look at his PFF receiving grade, he has a 33.6, which is last in the sample size, 76th. I definitely don't agree with PFF. I think he is pretty solid, especially after the catch. He doesn't have the best hands per se, and he's not a ridiculous route runner, but I definitely think he is better than the worst receiving back in this class for sure. And I do think he will be utilized in the passing game at the NFL level. Taking a look at his yards per out run, his 1.10 are 23rd in the sample size. Pretty solid, but not elite per se. His elusiveness rating, though, of 114.1 is 11th in the sample size. I don't necessarily agree with everything that PFF says, like I didn't with the receiving grade, but he is that elusive in the open field. It is going to be incredibly hard to stop him from maximizing yardage. Taking a look at his missed tackles forced, his 54 are 18th in the sample size, and that's 0.26 per attempt. Taking a look at his rushing yards per game as well as his attempts per game, he had 111.9 on the ground on 17.2 attempts per game, very efficient. He had 21.5 receiving yards on 1.7 receptions per game, and then a total of 8 touchdowns on the season. And so as far as his grades go, remember that DJ Giddens is give or take 6'1", 212 pounds, which if true would give him a 28.0 BMI, which is a little bit below the threshold of 30.0 that we typically desire for somebody to be a bell cow back, but not unheard of per se for somebody that could get some volume. He is a true junior out of Kansas State University. My valuation, I think he's worthy of a 3rd round pick. He's not projected to be one, but I think he is worthy. But I think some of the things in which he lacks, which I'll explain in a minute, do limit his potential ceiling. As far as my comp, I think he's a shiftier David Johnson type of runner. And so he resembles David Johnson in that they're both really tall, being 6'1", and they run quite upright. Now, that does hurt him a little bit, and I think if he lowered his pad level, he could be a much better running back. But he also brings a little bit more shiftiness than David Johnson did, specifically in his side-to-side agility, his change of direction skills, but he is quite elusive like David Johnson was. In terms of as a receiver, he might not be quite as good as David Johnson was, but still a relatively good receiving back. And my official grade for him is a 70.5 out of 100. In terms of his contact balance, I gave him a 2.5 out of 5. It's pretty average. And the reason being is that he runs so upright. I really think if he lowered his pad level, which once again, for somebody that's 6'1", might not be quite as easy, I definitely think he could break more tackles and more consistently. It isn't unheard of that he breaks tackles, but with his running style, it really doesn't lend itself to breaking tackles and staying upright. As far as his physicality is concerned, I once again gave him an average grade of 2.5 out of 5. He isn't the most physical guy in that he's not really going to be moving piles consistently, and he doesn't break the most tackles thanks to his running style and his frame in general. But it's not that he's per se afraid to seek contact. He will put his shoulder down and try to break tackles. It's just, once again, not as effective as some of these guys like Omarion Hampton. As far as his vision goes, I gave him a 4.5 out of 5. He rarely misses a hole, and his cutback ability is ludicrous, especially for somebody his size. And his vision is an asset even after he hits the hole in the open field. He is constantly maximizing yardage. As far as his ball security is concerned, I gave him a 4 out of 5. It's pretty good. On over 500 career attempts, he's only had 3 collegiate fumbles. But once again, we've seen some guys that haven't had any fumbles on more attempts. But once again, ball security is not going to be an issue at the NFL level, at least from anything I've seen on film in college. And in terms of his run IQ, he is constantly maximizing yardage. He finds the cutback lanes consistently. You'll see him move side to side effortlessly. He can decelerate relatively well for somebody that's this tall, honestly. And his elusiveness in the open field is absolutely amazing. Now, the thing about him is, as you'll see with his speed, it's really not very good in terms of his max long speed. He does get caught just about every time. I've seen a couple runs where he's able to barely make it the distance on, one of those 60-yard runs, but I really don't think he's going to be housing anything at the NFL level. Now, he does get to his top speed very quickly when he wants to. As you can see, I gave him an 8 out of 10 on acceleration. But it's more so not so much that he's going to be a home run hitter, it's that he's going to be a consistent chunk gain type of running back. And so despite only having a 3 out of 5 acceleration in the sense of it's a little bit above average in my opinion, for somebody his size, it is incredible. Typically, somebody this tall, their deceleration isn't really going to lend itself being a taller framed running back, but his agility and change of direction, especially for somebody his size, should never happen. He is constantly juking people out. He has a nasty jump cut. As far as his change of direction goes, it's also amazing. I gave him a 4 out of 5. He constantly is running one direction, just switches, runs the other direction effortlessly. He decelerates and accelerates relatively quickly, especially for somebody his size. And he pairs that with his nasty vision and elusiveness to be a constant chunk gain runner. And boy, is he going to do that in the NFL. As far as his catching, I gave him a 3.5 out of 5. He did have 7 drops on 83 collegiate targets, but I have seen him display soft hands, and he can catch lob passes on wheel routes down the field, so his ball tracking isn't an issue. As far as his route running, I gave him a 3 out of 5. Now, I did see him lined up out wide on a go route. I've seen him run wheel routes and shallow routes over the middle of the field and flats, but I don't really think he's going to be Christian McCaffrey at the NFL level in terms of his potential route tree. Now, in terms of his run after catch ability, he is immediately the running back that you see on film in terms of receiving carries after he gets the ball. But I will say the one thing is that keeps me from giving him a 5 is he typically, more so than cutting laterally after the catch, just tries to immediately turn upfield and gain yardage that way. Now, he's very effective in that regard, and so it's going to get him chunk gains through the air as well, just like it does on the ground. But the thing keeping him from being a 5 out of 5 is he doesn't choose to attack defenders laterally as much as I would like after the catch, but I know he could do it. In terms of his pass protection, I gave him a 3.5 out of 5. He's extremely willing. The one thing, though, is he overextends himself a little bit forward, and so that's going to cause him to lose his balance, and then more experienced pass rushers, especially at the NFL level, are going to be able to get around him if he doesn't fix that. But the willingness is absolutely there, and he does have the ability to be an effective pass protector. And so I think with good coaching, he definitely could get better in that regard. And I think that paired with his generally decent to above average ability as a receiving back will make him a 3-down threat at the NFL level. In terms of his dog factor, I gave him a 3.5 out of 5. It's a lot to do with his contact balance and physicality. The way he runs upright doesn't lend itself to him breaking tackles consistently. And you're definitely not going to see him break multiple tackles at the NFL level in a single run, I don't think. And as far as his physicality, he doesn't really move the pile as much, given his frame. But it's not because he isn't willing. He is an extremely willing runner of the football and is not afraid of contact whatsoever. In terms of his analytics, he's had 2 1,200-plus yard rushing seasons, along with 2 seasons over 250 receiving yards. But he's also only had more than 10 touchdowns once in his collegiate career. And so he also doesn't have one of those crazy Heisman-level seasons. And so I think he's above average in his analytics, but once again, doesn't have one of those Genty-like seasons. As far as his projected draft capital, I gave him a 2 out of 5. He's a projected 5th-round pick on NFL Draft Buzz. And if so, that's really not a very good team investment, honestly. I hope he goes a little bit higher than that. If he goes to a team that doesn't have a high investment at the running back position, I definitely think he could take over a backfield. And as far as his creativity, it's insane. He is constantly maximizing yardage with his jump cuts, with his change of direction ability, his vision, his acceleration, and especially his elusiveness in the open field. It is a lethal combination of traits. And if he was faster with his top end speed, this guy would be much higher in terms of his rankings, first of all, and the grade I give him, but then also in general consensus rankings, because in terms of skills besides that, they are all great. Now, as far as my potential worries and limitations, he doesn't possess the long speed to house longer NFL runs. That's just not going to happen, but he will get chunk gains due to all of his skills that allow him to excel in open space and get there. And then, will he lower his pad level in the NFL to avoid injury concerns and just break more tackles in general, as well as improve his contact balance? I don't know if he does that, but if he does, oh my goodness, watch out for this guy. And so I definitely think that, once again, if the team who drafts him doesn't have a ridiculous team investment at the running back position, I think he could quickly take over a backfield. And so where does Giddens rank among his contemporaries in the 25 class, as well as the 2024 class stacked on top of each other? Well, he's right in between Brooks and Wright from 2024's class, which is a good running back prospect. When we take a look at the great running back prospects, we still haven't had an elite one, in my opinion, in 2 years, although Genty's pretty close. You have Genty, Henderson, James, and Hampton, all from this class in the great tier of running backs. And then in the good tier of running backs, you have Judkins, Johnson, and Neal from this class, as well as Tootin as well at 72.5. And so at a 70.5, I think, once again, he's worthy of a 3rd-round pick. I think he's a very talented player. Where he's selected will definitely be affected by his athleticism at the combine or in his pro day. And so I think he's a really good running back prospect, and definitely a tier as a collegiate prospect ahead of Corum, Garendo, Lloyd, and the like. And so, once again, he's give or take 6'1", 212 pounds. He is a true junior out of Kansas State. My valuation, I think he's worthy of a 3rd-round pick. My comp, he's a shiftier David Johnson type of runner. And so he is very tall and runs upright like David Johnson did, but he's a little bit shiftier. He has better change of direction skills, deceleration, really, really good vision, and is incredibly elusive in the open field. And I would say he's not quite the receiver I thought David Johnson was, but I do think that he's a capable receiving threat. And once again, I've seen him lined out wide. I've seen him on wheel routes and your flats and the like. So he definitely has the normal route tree for a running back. And my official grade for him was a 70.5 out of 100. And I want to give a special shout out to my Patreon members. Thank you to Big Hunt, SP, Major Jack, and Infamy MTG. If you would like to become a member, I'm going to leave a link in the comment section. As far as what you'll gain, you'll get access to a private Discord server. I'm going to have a real life and fantasy football chat where we talk about real life NFL news. Any questions you might have will be answered in the real life NFL chat. And as far as the fantasy football chat, we'll talk about what's happening in the fantasy world. I'll give you team reviews, give you optimal roster construction based on your specific league settings, trades you can make to strengthen your roster, buying and selling points, specifically price points for various players based on your positions of need. I'll give you a special shout out, obviously, on all of these videos. You'll get early access to videos. You'll be part of private live streams that are not available to regular YouTube members. And you will also have the ability to suggest videos specifically for you on Patreon. I've already made one on Isaac Rendo as per request by one of my Patreon members. And so once again, if you would like to join, the link is going to be in the comment section. Thanks.